Timothy Roberts. He was last seen on an ordinary day, doing nothing that suggested danger was ahead. No goodbye that felt final. No argument. No sign that this would be the last time anyone would hear his name spoken in the present tense. Then he vanished. His vehicle was missing. His phone went silent. And just like that, Timothy Roberts became another unresolved case. A man who seemed to disappear without leaving behind a single clear clue. At first, investigators believed answers would come quickly. Timothy knew the area well. He wasn't traveling far. Friends and family insisted he had plans, responsibilities, reasons to come back. There was no history of reckless behavior, no indication he wanted to walk away from his life. Searches focused on roads, parking lots, nearby neighborhoods. Flyers were posted, calls were made, tips came in, but none led anywhere solid. Weeks passed, then months. The case stalled. What no one considered was the place everyone walked past without a second thought. The quiet dock along the water, where boats gently rocked and footsteps echoed hollowly on wooden planks. It looked harmless, familiar, ordinary. But beneath that dock, hidden by shadow, structure, and dark water, something had been waiting all along. A van. And inside it, the truth about what really happened to Timothy Roberts. The dock had never been considered a point of interest. It wasn't isolated. It wasn't damaged. Boats came and went. People stood there fishing, talking, watching the water move beneath them, unaware that anything was wrong. To everyone above, the surface told a calm story. But water has a way of hiding violence without noise. Years after Timothy Roberts vanished, a routine inspection changed everything. There was no dramatic tip, no sudden confession, just a decision to survey the water beneath the dock as part of maintenance work. Equipment lowered slowly, scanning areas no one had ever bothered to look beneath closely. Then the screen showed something that didn't belong. A large, boxy shape sat unnaturally still under the dock. It wasn't driftwood. It wasn't debris. It had sharp lines, symmetry, corners that nature doesn't make. A vehicle. Divers were called in, and as they descended, the dock above them became a ceiling of shadow. Visibility dropped almost instantly. The water was dark, thick with years of sediment and growth. As lights cut through the murk, metal appeared. A van. It was wedged perfectly beneath the structure, hidden from every angle that mattered. From above, the dock masked it completely. From the shoreline, the water reflected nothing unusual. Even boats passing nearby would have never seen it. It was as if the van had chosen the only place it could disappear without a trace. The exterior told a quiet story. No massive damage, no crushed frame, no sign of a violent collision. This wasn't a high-speed crash. It looked like the vehicle had rolled forward, slipped off the edge, and dropped straight down, guided by gravity into a blind spot no one ever questioned. Inside the van, divers saw what they feared but expected: human remains. The silence that followed the confirmation was heavy. Timothy Roberts hadn't run away. He hadn't vanished into a new life. He hadn't been taken. He had been right there, beneath familiar footsteps, beneath casual conversations, beneath years of normal life continuing overhead. Investigators began to understand why the case had gone cold so quickly. There were no skid marks because the dock edge had eroded and changed over time. No witnesses because the incident would have made almost no sound. No floating debris because the van sank immediately and stayed trapped beneath the structure. The dock didn't just hide the vehicle, it protected the secret. Recovery was slow and careful. The van had been there long enough to become part of the environment, Algae clung to the doors. Silt filled the interior. Time had sealed everything in place. As the vehicle was slowly raised, water poured out like the past finally releasing its grip. And with it came answers that had been waiting far too long. Investigators confirmed the van belonged to Timothy Roberts. Personal items inside matched what he had been carrying the day he disappeared. There was no question anymore. The missing man had never left. He had simply fallen into silence, hidden beneath a place no one ever thought to look. With the van recovered, investigators shifted their focus from where Timothy Roberts had been to how he ended up there, and how such a visible place could hide a truth for so long. They began by reconstructing the final hours of Timothy's day. Phone records showed nothing unusual. No frantic calls. No sudden changes in location. He had been moving through familiar territory, following a route he had likely driven countless times before. There was no indication he was lost, intoxicated, or in distress, which made the discovery even more unsettling. The dock area was reviewed in detail. Old photographs, maintenance records, weather reports, everything was pulled. What emerged was a picture of quiet danger. At the time Timothy disappeared, the dock had no barrier separating the parking area from the water. No guardrail, no curb, just open space leading to a drop that wasn't obvious, especially at night. Lighting was minimal back then. A few distant lamps, long shadows, reflections on the water that blurred depth perception. If Timothy had pulled forward slightly too far, even by a few feet, the van could have rolled off without warning. Investigators believe that's exactly what happened. There was no hard-braking evidence in the van's condition. No smashed front end. That suggested there was no time to react. One moment, the van was on solid ground. The next, it wasn't. Once the vehicle entered the water, the dock itself became part of the trap. The van dropped straight down and settled beneath the structure, where beams and supports shielded it from view. It didn't drift. It didn't float back to the surface. It wedged itself into a perfect blind spot. From that point on, discovery became nearly impossible. The water beneath the dock was deeper than expected, and over time, sediment built up around the vehicle. The van became darker, heavier, quieter. Even during storms, it stayed where it was, locked beneath wood and shadow. Divers also noted something else: the position of the remains. Timothy had been in the driver's seat. That detail mattered. It indicated there had been little time to escape. Once water rushed in, pressure would have sealed the doors. Panic and darkness would have taken over in seconds. The structure above would have made orientation nearly impossible. Even someone calm and strong would have struggled. This wasn't recklessness. It was timing. Bad timing on a familiar night, in a place that gave no second chances. For Timothy's family, learning these details was devastating, but also grounding. For years, they had lived with theories, with unanswered questions, with the fear that something worse had happened. Now, they knew the truth. He hadn't suffered at the hands of another person. He hadn't been abandoned somewhere unknown. He had been alone, yes, but not forgotten intentionally. He had simply been hidden by circumstances no one could have imagined. Investigators closed in on a final conclusion. The dock, unchanged for years, had unknowingly become a perfect hiding place for tragedy. And the most haunting part? People had stood above Timothy Roberts for years, never knowing he was beneath their feet. The days following the recovery were quiet, but heavy. There were no dramatic press conferences, no sudden rush of attention, just a slow realization settling in for Timothy Roberts's family, for investigators, and for the community that had unknowingly lived alongside the truth for years. For Timothy's loved ones, the news brought a complicated kind of closure. Grief resurfaced, sharper than it had been in a long time. But alongside it came relief. Not happiness, not peace exactly, but certainty. The waiting was over. The wondering had an answer. The endless loop of what-ifs finally had a place to stop. Investigators met with the family to explain what they believed had happened, step by step. They showed photographs of the dock as it had been years earlier. They explained the lighting conditions, the lack of barriers, the way the water line sat deceptively close to the parking edge. They described how the van could have slipped forward without noise, without witnesses, without leaving a mark behind. And slowly, the story made sense. What struck everyone involved was how ordinary the setting was. This wasn't a remote wilderness. This wasn't an abandoned road. This was a dock people used daily, a place associated with calm, leisure, familiarity. And yet, it had concealed a tragedy for years without raising suspicion. That realization sparked deeper conversations within law enforcement. If a vehicle could remain hidden beneath a dock for this long, what about other everyday locations near water? Boat ramps, marinas, fishing piers, parking lots along lakes and rivers, places that look harmless on the surface but offer direct, unprotected access to deep water. Timothy's case prompted reviews of other missing person files, especially those involving people last seen driving alone near water. Investigators began asking new questions. Were bodies of water searched thoroughly? Were blind spots overlooked? Were assumptions made too quickly because nothing appeared wrong above ground? In many cases, the answer was yes. The dock itself was changed after the discovery. Safety barriers were installed. Lighting was improved. Warning signs were added. Not because anyone had been negligent, but because Timothy's story proved how easily tragedy can slip through unnoticed gaps. For the community, there was a quiet unease. People who had stood on that dock for years now looked at it differently. Parents held their children a little closer. Fishermen paused, staring down into the water. The familiar no longer felt quite so harmless. And then there was the most haunting thought of all. Timothy Roberts hadn't been lost in some faraway place. He had been right there, beneath footsteps, laughter, conversations, sunsets. His absence wasn't due to distance. It was due to silence. The conclusion of Timothy Roberts' story arrived not with shock, but with understanding. After examining all the evidence, investigators ruled his death a tragic accident, one that happened quickly, quietly, and without witnesses. There was no indication of foul play, no signs of another vehicle, no evidence that Timothy ever knew what was about to happen. Just a moment. A slight roll forward, a sudden drop, and water that closed over everything before anyone noticed. What makes Timothy's case so haunting is not how far he disappeared, but how close he had been all along. His van wasn't hidden in some remote wilderness or forgotten canyon. It was beneath a dock people walked across every day. Life continued above him while time stood still below. The water didn't just conceal the vehicle, it erased the event. Timothy's story now serves as a quiet warning that familiar places can carry unseen dangers, and that disappearances don't always come from crime or intent. Sometimes they come from ordinary settings and unforgiving circumstances. For his family, the discovery allowed something they hadn't had in years, an ending. They could finally lay Timothy to rest. Finally speak about him in the past tense without guilt. Finally remember him for who he was, not for how he vanished. And for investigators, This case reshaped how they approach missing person cases near water. It reinforced the need to look beneath the surface, literally and figuratively. Because answers aren't always gone. Sometimes they're just hidden. If stories like Timothy Roberts's matter to you, if you believe every missing person deserves answers, if you want these lives remembered, not lost beneath time and water, then support this work. Like this video so more people see these stories. Subscribe so no case is ever forgotten. And share this story because the next truth may still be waiting beneath the surface. Thank you for watching.